Sometimes I just open up the studio and go, oh, friends, come over. You can pick what you want, except from the stuff from that pile. Except for the stuff from that pile.
I think my problem is once it goes in my stash, if I like fabric to have a job and then I am free to cut it, when it goes in my stash, I sometimes find it hard to use it because I almost get paralysed thinking, I've only got a fat quarter of this, and if I cut a bit out, what if I needed a full fat quarter? Which I don't often do, and I keep reminding myself of that. But if I buy it to make a quilt, I'm happy to cut one piece out of it, and that's fine. But if I take it out my stash, I actually find it quite hard to cut a piece out of it sometimes.
You're listening to Fussy Cutters Club podcast, a show that gives you permission to cut into the good fabric so you can make quilts you love. And now your host, who believes it's not a crime to love using novelty fabrics, Ange Wilson.
Hello, Fussy Cutters. Welcome to today's episode of Fussy Cutters Club podcast. Say that 3 times fast. Today I am talking to the ever fabulous Laura from Silver Stitches. Laura hosts a spooky sew-along with her friend every September and is a avid fussy cutter and a lover of Dear Stella and just an all-round lovely person. And I'd been wanting to talk to her for a while, so I was very happy to sit down and talk with her. And it's just such a lovely chat. Like, it's just a really lovely chat. So Laura has a wonderful accent. So if you're a fancier or purveyor of accents, you should stick around. Laura has a really lovely take on sewing and creating and is just one of those people that you instantly feel comfortable with and think, gee, I'd really love to spend the day sewing with you. So I hope you enjoy today's episode. Without further ado, let's get chatting. So I found you on Instagram and you have one of those feeds that if I am lacking in sojo, I go have a look at your feed to get some inspiration and then go back to playing with my fabric. Can you tell anyone who doesn't know what you do or who you are a little bit about what you do and what you love?
That's such a nice comment. Thank you very much. So I started sewing properly about 5 years ago. I am probably a fairly serious hobbyist, I would say. A lot of English paper piecing, quilting, bag making, pouch making, the occasional cushion, although that stresses me out a little bit as I am not good at putting zips into them. But like I say, it's a big hobby for me. I know a lot of people you've had on your podcast I would call professional sewists of some kind. I've got a couple of patterns in Love Patchwork and Quilting and another one coming out, and I'm a FAF ambassador. But other than that, it's pretty much sewing for fun.
Yep. And that's the good thing about Fussy Cutters Club is that really it is everyone from hobbyist to professional. The thing that we all love is having fun with fabric. So now you said you do a little bit of EPP. A little bit. You do quite a lot of EPP and you're quite proficient in it. Is there a reason why you like EPP so much?
I love sofa sewing, or social sewing, might be a better way of putting it than sofa sewing. But I find it so relaxing. I think when it comes to cutting fabric for an actual quilt sometimes, putting it down in front of you and taking a rotary cutter to it, I feel like it's all that about measure twice, cut once and things. Yep. Whereas paper piecing, you sit down with the templates, you can draw around them. There's lots of margin for error in that. And that's probably where the fussy cutting comes in, because it's probably my favourite thing about paper piecing is sitting down and picking out all those little shapes and animals and different things for it.
Yeah, and you have a keen eye for a good, people call them novelty fabrics, but I actually call them fussy cut fabrics, where you find a motif and can isolate that in your shapes really well. Do you have a process for that? Is there, like for me, I tend to select fabrics that tell a story in my head about the combination that I've got together? Or do you just go, that looks great, I'll put it together, anything can go with anything? Like if I'm working with a gnome, there generally turns up mushrooms, strawberries, like kind of, birds, something that goes with a garden theme with that gnome? Or do you just go, this works with that, that's what I'm going to use?
I think it depends what I'm working on. I definitely am a serial starter of EPP, and trying to finish a few of those things is definitely a big plan for me. But I've got things like I've got a never-ending Halloween Cherish quilt that is due to be finished 2025 at my current rate. And for that one, I think that's one of my favourite parts about it is I pick the large centre for the middle for the Cherish, so it's a 3-inch one that I'm doing. And then because it's all Halloween fabric, it's fitting it in. So if I've picked a graveyard for the middle, I quite like to add flowers and skeletons around it. I did one of the Ray Ritchie cats that looks like it's at school. So I was trying to think, well, it looks like it's in a tower. What can I add around that? Whereas I've got the big version of Cherish on the go, which is all of the neon Chula fabrics. And that one is very much, there's a pink block, a blue block, a yellow block. But I really enjoy it. That's one of the things I think I really like about Halloween fabric. There's so many different little cats and skeletons and things that it's quite good for a theme. I think I did a pirate block as well for one of them.
Because you can go fancy dressed as a pirate. So you're doing Smitten as well, which we had Lulu Well on the podcast, and she talked about that pattern. And so you're doing, it's a woodland theme, isn't it? It's not, like you're not doing a specific designer. It is a mix of all different.
So that's my current. So I'm in we're the Bobs, which is a bright overseas bee. So it's an Instagram bee, and that's my bee block for this year is the Smitten quilt. So it was a Heather Ross colour palette inspired woodland animal theme, and it's the women in the bee are the best fussy cutters. Every block that they do, when we started the bee, I thought I really need to up my game because every single block that they would put in, I think the first one we did was an echinacea flower, and every single different low volume had a different fussy cut. But the Smitten one has worked out so fun. People have put, I said a bit of whimsy. So there's unicorns, there's seed packets, there's strawberries, gnomes. Someone has used one of the little Chula Loch Ness monsters, which I thought was quite fun since it's coming to Scotland. So those blocks have been arriving in the post, which has been very fun. But that might end up being my first finished EPP quilt since I've had 12 helpers to get it done.
I was going to say, it is a brilliant way if you've got an EPP project that you would like to do. It's a really great way of getting it finished because you've got other people contributing the blocks. I'm like, in my head, I'm like, could I get a bee together to do a Dear Jane EPP? Get them 100 blocks.
Last year it's Kate Bastie's Haunted Halloween Houses with my bee one, and I don't love doing FPP, so that was a perfect bee one because again I had a whole group of people that were doing probably the bulk of the work for it, but it was the same because there's so much variation in that quilt. Every little door and window has got a different Halloween thing in it. So I'm probably a bit shameless in thinking I'm trying to pick things that I've got my worker bees to help with.
No, that's smart. So your Halloween quilt is finished and on your Instagram feed. Did you end up submitting it to Festival of Quilts?
I did. I thought there's an RB, I think there's 3 of us in the UK and everybody else is in America. So there was 2 of us from the UK put our bee quilts in the group category. So I thought that was quite nice for the ladies in America to see it hanging here as well. Yeah. And I don't think at Festival I've ever really seen a Halloween quilt the past few years that we've been. It's not super popular here.
No, and I find, because obviously talk to a lot of fussy cutters, Halloween fabric is one of those ones that divides. I say that like it's subversive or something, but it's like people are either really drawn to the subject matter or they're like, oh, I'm not going to put skeletons and bones in my quilt. And I think, oh, they're some of my favourites. Like a good skelly goes a long way. So it is really interesting, and I love that you consciously went, I'm going to put a Halloween quilt in because I haven't seen one before, because you never know who's going to go to a quilt show, and who's going to see that quilt and think, oh, that's exactly what I love. I can do that too in quilting. And so it's a really great way of opening up possibilities for people and trying to attract more people into the craft, which we need to do, obviously. So you do a lot. You're like me, you don't do FPP willingly. Can I say that?
Yes, 100%. I appreciate what it does, but I do not enjoy the process.
No, and it's really funny because I have an all FPP quilt coming out for the first time, and it literally was just because I wanted to achieve a certain look. And so I was like, this is where form over function. I'm like, I'm willing to sacrifice having to do some FPP blocks to get the look that I want. But yeah, it's not my favorite either. But you've done some really beautiful FPP work, like your envelopes,
That was a B one as well.
See, you're really clever, whereas I'd be like, oh man, I've got to make 40 FPP blocks. And you're like, I'll just share it around.
So, that one wasn't mine. Yep. It's a girl, Cassidy, picked that one. I think it's Letters to Santa, it's called. So that was her B month. Yep. And I actually quite liked that one because it was quite big pieces. But FPP is funny. I like to do it in private. I don't like people to watch me do it because I have to sit and stare at it for so long. So it's a sort of, not in the dark, but I don't like doing it. And not that I do a lot of public sewing, but at a sewing group and things, I just like to be able to sit and stare at it while I think about it. But Letters to Santa I found quite easy because it was one big piece in the middle. But I'm quite envious of Cassidy's quilt. I'd quite like to do that in the future, I think.
It's really funny. I don't know what it is. So I'm good friends with Christy from Quiet Play, and she's all FPP Amazing. All the time. And I know it's really hard to have her in the circle of trust and be like, she's like, I knocked this out today, and there's like 7 beautifully done FPP blocks. And she'll go, what have you done? And I'll be like, I made this little 3-inch square. But I've often talked to her about whether it's a personality thing or the way our brains work, where FPP, because I'm the same, it takes me a while to make the transition from working in reverse. It's not in reverse, but working back to front to back. And so I'm the same. I spend a lot of time, especially that first block, trying to work out what's going where. And I've talked to her a lot about fussy cutting for FPP. I'm great, like if those envelopes, if it's a big space and I can just stick it and it's the first one, I'm good. But if it's like the 7th piece and it's got little weird angles or something, I can't get my brain to work in the flip. Like, yeah, it is a skill set that I appreciate, and I get the envy because I would be the same. Those envelopes are amazing.
I find if I think about it, it's a problem. If I don't think about what I'm doing, I get through the block. But if I start to think about it, that's when it goes, I think. And then it just somehow doesn't work.
It's like that for a lot of things, I think. If you do it, if your brain is elsewhere and you're just going through the motions, your subconscious just kind of does what it needs to be able to do it. Do you find, is there a quilt that you go, that's on my bucket list? Like that I need to make that quilt before I can make quilts no more? Or do you just...
hoping to make my bucket list quilt soon, but I've got a 1 in, 1 out for EPP at the moment. So when I get one finished, I'm finally going to start the Chula Nova quilt, which I think I've planned out about 10 times, and probably with my very first Instagram post with my original plan for it. And I've finally settled now that the new Disco Kitty is out. I want to do it in Disco Kitty. But I'm waiting, 1 in, 1 out. So get one finished, and then I'm really hoping to get that one done.
So the Nova quilt is your next one when you do 1 in, 1 out. That's a really great principle for getting through your work in progresses. Do you find it easy to stick to, or are you like a squirrel and you're like, every time I see something new, I want to do it? Or are you really good at keeping on track?
I'm really good at starting new projects, would be the answer to that. But a bit of me thinks it's what I find fun. So why not? And if I see something in a new fabric like that, the Chula came out with the neons and the lions and things. And as soon as it was released, I thought, I have to make that in a cherish. My Halloween cherish is a small size, so I feel like that's different in the big size. And I think I've made one of each animal block and then parked it, although it'll be a quick one to finish because they are such big blocks. But I had so much fun doing it, and I know that I'll really enjoy going back to it. But then I do sometimes get the guilt and think maybe I should finish a few things. And it's quite nice to revisit things that you've been working on, but I try not to feel too guilty, but I can't. My friend, she's been sent me an anonymous letter telling me to stop starting EPP projects. Been threatened in the post.
Ditch her. You don't need that. But it is, I think you hit the nail on the head. It is something you do for fun. Even if you're a professional, and I use that term loosely, this is what you do for fun. And so who says you can't pick up and start and stop? And what you need to do is do what I've done, is found a friend who's a good finisher. And then I give all my blocks to her and go, could you just put this together in a top for me, please?
That's perfect. I'm using the excuse with my Halloween one that I need new. I'm trying to keep every print different. So I keep putting that off each year to finish it so that I can get new prints each year. But there's only so many quilts that excuse works with, I think.
Have you seen Rifle Paper's Halloween that's just come out?
I love it.
It's such a small scale, which is great if you've got a bit of a passion for 1-inch piecing, which I do. And then there's another one. So there was Rifle Paper I saw this week, and is it Ruby Star have got a new Halloween one that's just dropped, like just become available too?
I'm fully into Halloween planning. My friend Fiona and I run a Spooky September sew along every year on Instagram.
Yep.
So we're just getting organised for September. And at Festival of Quilts, there was quite a few shops that had some of the new ones. So I've splashed out. I've ordered the Rifle Paper. I've ordered the black and the white starry print to do backgrounds for scrappy. I'm going to do fussy cut scrappy Dresden plates as my Halloween one this year, the Kate Basti pattern. So I thought the Rifle Paper with the small size would be good for that. And then I got Poppy Cotton, have a Halloween one out, which is really nice as well. And I learned today that Poppy Cotton are a brand, which I didn't realise. I thought they were a designer, but that's really nice. There's a new Ruby Star one, which has got great big cat faces in it as well.
Yeah, which is good if you're if you were doing a centre for your cherish, the big faces will be good in that too.
There's quite a few. Is it Rachel Hauer has got a really nice one out, which is, hers are quite dark and moody, which are quite nice.
Yep.
And
but they go well with Ray Ritchie from Dear Stella.
They're quite a lot of those are my big ones in the middle of cherish. And then Dear Stella have got a really nice one out. It's, I'm going to say this wrong, Faye Guanipa. And it's kind of pink. She's done a kind of pink and mint range as well. The Dear Stella ones are really nice for Halloween. So I feel like... Yeah.
Oh, Dear Stella.
You talked a lot about that with, is it Christina at Fabric Pop? Yeah. Because there are so many nice Dear Stella ones, and I think they often get forgotten about. But they also do really good cat prints. So, yeah, they're great for the kind of cat options.
Yeah, and Pammy Jane, who's with Dear Stella, she has a new Halloween one coming out as well, which has a really beautiful peach in it. So you're not getting that kind of stark orange that sometimes you find in Halloween. But, yeah, I mean, there is – so for me, it's the thrill of the chase for me with it. A lot of the time it's finding the perfect fabric for something that I've got in mind, or finding a fabric that I just have to have that's unusual. Do you have the same thing? Do you spend a lot of time looking at fabric, or do you go, I need fabric now for this, so I'll look, and then you don't look at other times?
I probably spend a lot of time looking at fabric, and I fully blame Instagram because I think it gives you such easy access to the brands and the designers. You can follow both, and as soon as something new comes out, you get that little bit of a sneak peek of it. But I think it's funny because the quilts I like the most are usually ones I've specifically bought the fabric to make. But I buy a lot of fabric that's not got a quilt in mind. So trying to use ones out my stash and build bundles and pallets from that is something I really want to work on, rather than thinking, like I've done, that rifle paper will be the perfect background. I'll order that. I probably have backgrounds, but we're not using them. We've ordered them.
And I guess that's the thing. Again, I look at it as no one ever said to Leonardo da Vinci, you've got too many paint colours. And no one ever goes to like a mosaic artist and says, oh, you've got too many tiles, or, you know, that kind of thing. But with fabric, we all tend to go, oh, my stash is really big. And I think, well, that's what you paint with. So the more options you have, if you're able to, then, you know, the more fun you can have swimming in it like Scrooge McDuck. But it's that thing of we put so much pressure on ourselves around our fabric that sometimes I think I get caught in that thing of, oh, I've got too much, I should really use it. Whereas sometimes I just open up the studio and go, oh, friends, come over, you can pick what you want, except from the stuff from that pile. Except for the stuff from that pile.
I think my problem is once it goes in my stash, if I like fabric to have a job and then I am free to cut it, when it goes in my stash, I sometimes find it hard to use it because I almost get paralysed thinking I've only got a fat quarter of this, and if I cut a bit out, what if I needed a full fat quarter? Which I don't often do, and I keep reminding myself of that. But if I buy it to make a quilt, I'm happy to cut one piece out of it, and that's fine. But if I take it out my stash, I actually find it quite hard to cut a piece out of it sometimes. But I think it's that thing of it's not allocated yet, almost.
Do you ever think, because I used to be like that, and then I realised that Etsy and Instagram and eBay would help me find it again if I didn't. So for a long time I didn't cut into stuff because I was like, what if a better project comes along? Or what if I make a mistake? Or what if? And then I realised that if I use it, I can buy more. And if I use it and I love it, like there's been some prints here that were released before I started sewing. And so then I go on a hunt. And so I use Etsy, and occasionally I've put out a call on Instagram and said to people, does anybody have any of this in their stash? And because quilters are so amazing, a lot of times they'll go, hey, yeah, I've got this, you can have this. So that helped me get past it, but I completely get it. I completely understand the thinking around it. And I don't think you'll ever not be able to find a replacement for it.
Yeah, so much gets reprinted now, I think. The popular prints come back. And I know I've never done it, but there's the Quilty Wishes on Instagram. Someone runs it once a year, which I think is really nice because you can say, I need this, and then just send out some goodwill and grant someone else's wish. Yeah. And I think the girls in the bee are all really good at cutting holes in fabric. And I have a lot of holy fabric, but it's fabric I bought to cut a hole in. It's only the ones that I haven't bought with that in mind I struggle with somehow. But I'm trying, like you said, trying to be better about cut the hole and enjoy it. It's better to have it in something and see it and love it. Yeah. And it can still sit in the drawer and be holy than just have it sitting there unloved.
Is there a fabric that you missed that you wish you had some of?
There was a couple that I really would have liked that I probably actually got in the past year or so. And I sound like a crazy cat lady, but some of the Heather Ross cats have come back and been reprinted, or people in the bee have kindly sent me a little bit. And I've really started sewing after Disco Kitty came out. So I've been collecting the cats from that and now have a piece of each of them with the new one coming out. So they were the kind of ones that I had. There's probably a couple of the Heather Ross cats I'd still quite like to get. And I'm going to do one day. I've got there's a Christmas cat fabric drawer and the cat fabric drawers. And one day I'm going to do the most epic fussy cut cat quilt. And half of it will be ugly cat fabric from the 90s. But it's going to be great.
It's really funny because so Heather Ross, obviously, for Fussy Cutters, Heather Ross is a great one because she's an illustrator. And so a lot of her stuff has a story element to it. I saw on your Smitten quilt, is there gnome cats?
But I think they're called rabbits on the fabric, or bunnies, and they are 100% cats. I don't know if the rest of the range is rabbits, but it's got something about bunnies in the name. But they're new from this year.
Oh, of course. See, and this is me, right? I was looking through your Instagram feed and I was like, are they gnome cats? And then I was like, write that down. You're going to need to go find it. I'm like, okay.
You'd never find it if you looked for Dear Stella gnome cats. It's Dear Stella gnome bunnies. It's what will get it for you.
I don't understand sometimes. But it's one of the things I was talking to Christy about it because she designs fabric. And I was like, if I worked in a fabric company, all the fabrics would have weird, funny, like non-obvious names or be named after songs. But yeah, it's called Somebody to Love.
There you go.
And they are totally
I've always wanted
rabbits.
I've always wanted to be the person that names lipsticks.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like that would be a really fun job. Or Kona colour solids and things like that, where you can just name the fabric.
There's an Australian company, Two Green Zebras, who started their own fabric line, Devonstone, and I love working with their solids. And their solids are named after Aussie things. So there's like a green called a wheelie bin green. I don't know whether you have them, the big
yes.
And then there's like just names of fabric. I usually have the swatches hanging up here, but just names of the fabric that I think, oh, that is truly Australian. Like it's just, sometimes they're named after like locations and places, like there's a Byron Bay blue and stuff like that. But then every so often someone's had fun with a name and I kind of go, I really appreciate that. I'm using that in a fabric kit just so everyone else has to say, I'm out of wheelie bin green.
It's like the Chula solids that are unicorn poop and dragon's breath, the two different colourways, which I thought was quite cute as well.
Yes, she's a good one for naming stuff that's a pun or a play. Like she had the Dear John where it was the stag heads and
there's a print. There's a print. I'm sure she said in Roar. It's the one that's got the asteroid, and she'd wanted to call it like Apocalypse or the End of the World or something, and was told you can't name it that. It doesn't. It's too serious.
That's funny. Given that she's named something poop, it's funny that they went, no, that's a bridge too far. You can't.
Keep me happy.
But yes. Yeah, quilters don't like skeletons or thinking about doomsday. But yes, it is one of those things that I think it's funny how something as trivial as fabric, like it doesn't cure cancer, it doesn't solve world peace, we can't drop some in Israel and fix what's going on over there, but it makes us happy in so many different ways.
Yeah, when we're buying fabric, we often joke it's not drugs. So I suppose that makes it okay.
Yeah, although sometimes I'm like, I wonder what my son will reflect on his childhood, like his growing up and everything, about what his mother did. Because my dad was a really avid fisherman, and so lots of rods, lots of fishing tackle, boats, all of that sort of stuff. And that colours my childhood memories because we spent a lot of time fishing and I hate it. And so it's one of those things, and I think, is he going to look back on his childhood and go, gee, I spent a lot of time standing next to Mum as she was sewing, and Mum used to get really excited when we'd go somewhere and see fabric and be like, oh, imagine this is a quilt. But yeah, it's nice to have, like I often go, I think we're really fortunate and blessed to have a hobby, to have something we love. And so I try to encourage him to have something that he loves that brings him joy. And so it's really interesting to see as he develops what he's attracted to or what sparks joy. Because I thought my genes would be fairly dominant, but I think he's more like his father.
I do think it's good. It's good for you, I think. Like I have like a kind of office job. So doing something with my hands that's creative, it must work a different bit of the brain, I think. And definitely when I started to revisit my Halloween cherish for this year, I think I've Pavloved dogged myself because I was instantly happy when I got it out and started working on it. It kind of triggered something in my brain that was good vibes. Just sort of that muscle memory of cutting those shapes and things. So I do think it's good for you in some way or another. Till it goes wrong.
Is there... No, as we like to say, that's a learning opportunity. Very HR speak. That's a learning opportunity. Is there a technique that you haven't tried that you would like to try?
I have dabbled a little bit, but I have two friends that are amazing at needle turn applique and produce all sorts of fancy vines and flowers and nice shapes at the drop of a hat. And my applique extends to sewing down hexie flowers, and I sewed down a Dresden recently, but that's about it. I did try some needle turn applique. I got one of the Yoko Saito books on little houses for Christmas, and starting with tiny 1-inch houses with 1/4-inch windows was a terrible thing to try applique with. But I've done a lot more hand sewing since then, so I've got a little pool of fabric waiting to become a cushion is what I'm aiming to do, I think. Start off with that and see if it goes the way of EPP or FPP for my sewing joy.
Yeah, and it's on my wish list is a Boston album quilt where they used to make every block in it was representative of something that happened in their life, and they do like the big eagles and the wreaths and they're an American tradition. And I wanted to do one of those, but with a reflective of my life. And I think, the work I would have to do to get the skill set, especially given I don't do any slow stitching. EPPs as far as it goes. But yeah, they're the quilts when I wear at quilt shows that I'm always drawn to, because I think, just the patience and the skill. But again, it's probably like any muscle if you exercise it enough and you're determined enough.
Yes.
So you're a FAF ambassador. Is there a reason why you love the FAF so much other than its awesome name?
And my mum gave me my first one, which is how I started sewing, with my mum's hand-me-down FAF, which is still my current machine. I think you get so used to what you use, and I'm quite spoiled. I think I learned to sew on a really nice machine that has the hover foot and the thread cutter and does a lot of things for you. So the one I've got on loan from VAF is a travel machine, the kind of smaller one, which doesn't have quite as many of the features built in. So it's kind of interesting to kind of learn to sew properly, is what I'm saying that I'm doing. And that it shouts at me when I don't lift the foot up and things like that. And I'm thinking, do it yourself. So it's been quite good to try that out. But it's funny how passionate I think people are about that. Like I'd never switch because it's what I'm used to and I like the way it works and it works for me. But then people would say that, I guess, about what they learned on as well.
I think of sewing machines as the sewing world's equivalent of cars. You know how some people are like, I will only ever drive a Subaru, I'll only ever drive a Mazda, or, you know, in Australia growing up there was this huge rivalry between Holden and Ford, and kids on playgrounds were like, you're either a Holden or a Ford. There's no kind of, and I think sewing machines in the sewing world are kind of like that. But I had the benefit of my first machine I ever bought for myself as a grown up was a faff, and it was wonderful. And I've still got it. And I've been teaching my mum to sew very intermittently, but that was the machine I sent her when she was like, I think I'd like to learn to sew. And I'm like, oh, well, lady, learn on this machine because it's wonderful. But then I got a machine that had every bell and whistle on it, and I felt really guilty that I never used any of that functionality. And so when I got a chance to upgrade, I bought a straight stitch only machine because I was like, I just need one. I don't need 99.
Well, that's the travel. The travel one's been great, and it's lighter and it's portable. You've got to adjust the tension on it, and I've never had to adjust tension. And it's a learning experience. But I think it's a good one, actually. But then I go back to using the big machine, and I think you're my best friend.
Yeah, I am. So Ray Lee, who does all my quilting and who's an all-round awesome lady, that's her thing I admire about her is you can put her in front of any machine, and because she understands the fundamentals and like tension and, where to look if something's not right, or how to know if it's the bobbin that's playing up. And I'm like, she understands all of that. Whereas they put me in front of the machine and go, it's not working. And I go, do you have the manual? I shall read the manual. So is there anything that you kind of go, like, where do you go for inspiration? Is there an account that you look at, or are there, your bee mates? Like, how do you keep your sojo alive?
I would say Instagram for me is definitely, I spend a lot of time scrolling, a lot of time chatting. I wouldn't say quilting in my generation in Scotland is a big thing. So it's really nice to have some online peers, even if they are on the other side of the world. And the bee is amazing. Everybody in it, like I say, their fussy cutting is amazing. Their sewing is amazing. Their stash is amazing. Maybe just because they're in America, or a lot of them have been sewing a long time. Like, I hadn't heard of Lizzie House till she was coming back out, and everybody in the bee was going mad. And I was like, who is Lizzie House? I've not heard of this person before. Same with Heather Ross. I like Heather Ross, but I'm not fully up on the older collections and things. And I'll say to the guys, I'll be like, so tell me, what's the goldfish from? And someone always knows where it's from. But you probably say I spend too much time scrolling Instagram. But like I say, the designers are there, the pattern writers are there. Lo and behold, stitchery, so interwoven.
Oh, yeah.
My first real quilt, and probably is what sucked me into it. I love everything that she does and things.
Yep.
But I think it's great because you're scrolling it and you're seeing the designers, you're seeing the fabric brands, you're seeing the pattern, and you're seeing the people that are making the stuff as well. So you get to kind of see it all in a totally different way depending on who's doing it.
Yeah, so you get to see through the different lenses of where their roles are in the chain, I guess. I find it really funny because so Lizzie House was like a massive designer for me. I was very excited when she came back. But it is really interesting because there's a whole new generation of people getting to know Lizzie's work, and the excitement of us who knew her when she was producing regularly is just kind of trickling out and infecting everybody else. So we talk about how hard it is to break into the fabric industry and be a successful fabric designer. Is there something that you look for in fabric when you buy it? Is it a scale thing? Is it white space, negative space? Can you kind of go, oh, I look for, what makes a good blender for you? Or
I think it depends what I'm working on. Like, I'm always on the look. Like, I know my Halloween quilt's never ending, so I'm always on the look for things that will fit into that. Quite often, I guess, I'm quite big into animal prints and things that are fun. I really like a good blender, like when Starry came out for Ruby Star. It kind of works that and speckled work for so many different things. And low volume versus loud volume is something I think I've been trying to get my head around, because in my head low volume was like a kind of white on white or a light colour on it, and then actually we've done a lot of bee quilts where people are fussy cutting little people on white and things and working it in, And I think I've separated that into low and loud volume, and I'm kind of leaning into loud volume, but I find it quite hard sometimes to look at something and think, is that a print or is it a low loud volume that I can use in the background? But probably something fun or something a bit different, or let's say cat fabric. I keep joking I need a new favourite animal and was going to pick a capybara, and now Ruby Star bringing out capybara fabric. And I'm like going to move on to stick insects or something that's even more unlikely to feature on fabric.
Well, Charlie Harper, he has bugs, I think, or it might have been Alexander Henry, because I have stick insects. Because I was the same. I was in a shop and they were in the sales bin. Like, go figure. And I was like, this is amazing. And it's really brightly coloured. And I was like, I'm going to find a place to put bugs on a quilt somewhere. But why pick a new animal? At least cats, they're going to be fairly standard. You go for something, like if your favourite animal was a slug, you're never going to see that on fabric. Oh, no, that's not true. You probably will.
You get a lot of snails, I guess. There's a lot of deer Stella snails. There's a few of them popping up in my smitten, I think. But maybe not so much slugs.
No, and even when Chula did snakes, I was like, oh, that's a bold choice. Because living somewhere where there is multiple snakes, I'm like, but I always surprised how well that sold and how people kind of embraced an animal that is normally not loved.
Yes.
Dear Stella have a really good shark line as well, where they play into the Jaws thing.
I have that as a low volume. I'm sure I've got a white on white shark print from them.
It's funny that you talk about what is low volume, because I think that's the great Lizzie House has a real thing about it's not low volume. But what constitutes a low volume? Because I was the same. I was like, it's white or cream or beige with a very sparse print with very minimal colour in it. And then I see some low volume, some stuff where people go, oh, this is low volume. And I go, oh, that's a lot of bang for the buck in that. Yeah. I wouldn't say that. So maybe loud volume is the new term. You've just coined your own new term.
I think there's a lot in our B right in the beginning. There was a few where people were picking what I thought was low volume, and I'm glad I wasn't the first person to make a block, because then I saw a few other people and I went, oh, I'm not on target for this. But that's that's one of those ones where I think I need to get the stash out and actually cut a hole in some of the things in it to get the little cute animals and people and things for it.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see how we all interpret colour differently. But I always chuckle, like I can't do a bee. I've tried a couple of times, but I can't do a bee because I'm too much of a control enthusiast to be able to go, oh yeah, you shouldn't, that's not the fabric you use there. Like it just pushes all my buttons. But I see yours and I'm like, oh, maybe that's what happens when you get a group of people that are all really similar and see the world same, but different, and how they work a cohesive quilt. Has your bee evolved over the year, like over the time? Are they more cohesive now as you get to know each other and you go, oh, that's what that person's going to like? Or
I think this is the second year of doing it, and I think we've probably picked up quite well on, everybody's got a fairly similar style. I think I don't want to, not modern like the modern movement, but modern like current. I think everybody's quite current. Fussy Cuts, similar kind of style for that kind of thing. And one of the things I really like about it, there's always a side swap on the go. There's Christmas hexes and economy blocks and things. So there's always a little group disappearing off to the side to say, let's do, last year we did a Christmas hexy swap. We're doing that again this year, and we've got the economy blocks and things as well. So there's always something on the go, or someone else, like you say, will say, has anybody got this? Does anybody know where you get it? And there's always a kind of little pool of people full of information. But they've totally helped me up my game, partly by forcing me to do a lot of FPP. I've not had a choice. That's been what the block is that month. And it's been good for me, because it is something that I maybe would have avoided till now. But it's just so inspiring, I think, as well, particularly when we all make the same thing. Everybody makes an orange and black block and they all look completely different. But then when you put them together, they look great, which is kind of weird.
Yeah, and that's my thing. Yeah, about 100 days is it's very selfish for me. I get to see the same block in so many different fabrics and so many different takes on it. And so it feeds that love of fabric even more. And plus I get to fan out about how people, like I always love seeing how people approach stuff and how their minds work.
Yeah, like Instagram, it annoys me that they've changed the hashtags on it and you can't search by the newest in things, because it was so handy that you could go and fall down a hole. You want to make a quilt. Even I like looking at it to see how people have quilted things, and you could easily find all kind of quilted versions of it and stuff like that. Just it's so amazing how it looks different depending on the quilting, never mind what you pick for the fabric.
Yeah, that's why I don't quilt anything of my own, because I'm like, I only have time for one focus. And for me at the moment, that's the fabric and the piecing. If I was to become a quilter, I would just become obsessed with the quilting side of things, and then I would never patchwork stuff. And so very early on, I was like, I'm either one or the other. I am not both. Hello, fabric, my old friend. That's what we're going to do. So, yeah, it is. It's just really amazing. And it's just like I go look at your feed so there's people that I go and I go, all right, well, who am I going to go look at? And it's that thing of, I don't want to make what you make in the sense, I mean, I would love to, but in the sense that we're all our own people, but seeing how someone else interprets something inspires you to go look at your own stash differently. So, yeah, keep posting if you wouldn't mind. So I will put the links to your Instagram and everything in the show notes. I've had such a lovely time talking to you, and it's so nice to hear a Scottish accent, because you're right. I find there's not a lot of quilters. I mean, there are some quilters, not a lot of quilters in Australia. So very rarely do you hear an Australian accent, but I feel like lately I've been finding lots of Scottish quilters, and so it's nice to hear that. Thank you for giving up your time. Thank you for sharing with us, and I look forward to seeing your spookiness in September.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been lovely chatting.
Thanks for listening to the Fussy Cutters podcast. Enjoyed listening? Why not subscribe so you'll never miss an episode? Did you know the quickest way to the heart of any podcaster is to leave a review or recommend the podcast to a friend? It's true, it is. Until next week, get out there and fondle that fabric.